Good morning and welcome to Legacy Planning with local attorney Steve Waltar. Legacy Planning is committed to helping you provide personalized and compassionate estate planning to help you organize and transfer your estate smoothly with minimal taxes, costs, and hassles. Steve has the mind of an attorney and the heart of a pastor, and he'd love to take your call this morning to answer your estate planning questions. The lines are open at 1-800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Now, here's your host of Legacy Planning, Steve Waltar.
Good morning, Seattle, Puget Sound. This is Steve Waltar. We are here live and local. Great Seattle day today to talk about legacy planning. You know, next week, actually, I'm giving seminars. So would love to have you call in today. We are available for your phone calls today at 1-800-955-8200. And also, we're going to be giving seminars. So our seminars are kind of throughout the community. We'll be in Kirkland, kind of Bellevue area. We'll be up in Bothell. We'll be over in Issaquah. So I would encourage you to go to our website, which is waltar.com. Let me spell that for you. www, obviously, Waltar's WALTAR.com. And then you could go online and look at those fine things. So I like to usually summarize a little bit about this week in planning, and then when I have a guest, introduce a guest. I've got my own accountant here today, a CPA, Mark Middlesworth, that I will, if you've got tax questions, good day to be calling in on that. So this week in planning, I try to think about what are the things that keep my clients awake at night? What worries them, and how can I help them with their estate planning needs? And as we get older, sometimes people move into care facilities and they fall in and out of favor with their children. And sometimes I get children calling me, out of state, oh, this, that, and the other. I had a client come in this week, and she was worried about, her son actually had a power of attorney that at one point was helpful, but he was basically trying to control her life from afar. And, I got the mind of an attorney, the heart of a pastor. I really want to make sure that, my clients are the ones that I plan for. I'm not going to do a plan because the kid calls me and says, hey, give away mom's assets to qualify her for Medicaid. Mom would be my client. I got to know what's in her best interest. So at any rate, I got to meet with this person, and it was time to revoke an existing power of attorney. She can do all of her own management herself, and really at this point, she's a lot more concerned about a grandchild that is seeing her often. And what I am always trying to figure out is, okay, I want to make sure no one's taking undue influence and trying to, bleed people for money or ask for money or this or that. But as long as I get to sit down and meet with a client, then it's very important, who do you list as an agent? And when do you start to hand that stuff over? So if you've got any question about estate planning, wills, trusts, any of that stuff, we're available for that. 1-800-955-8200, or during the week, call my office, 425-455-6788. So the number for today, again, 955-8200. So I met with one gal, and we tried to resolve all those issues, and it means that we're going to amend a will, a trust, a power of attorney, that sort of thing. I've got some other clients that I did a plan for them years ago, and what they did is they kind of wanted to avoid court, keep it private, do all sorts of things. But now one of the spouses, we age, right? And in our country, we're able to have pretty good health care, but our lifestyle may not be wonderful. And so if someone's kind of got the pre-Alzheimer's, this, that, or the other, sometimes people have a concern. Well, what if one spouse dies, and whether you've got a good estate plan, a living trust, a will with various tax boxes or not, what happens if the survivor needs care, whether it's Alzheimer's care, memory care? What if all of a sudden all of the assets need to be used up for the care of the survivor? Well, a lot of my clients, parents in particular, they don't want to have all of the assets burned up before they die. And if you're struggling with that, you hear others out there, my competitors talk about safe harbor trusts. Well, guess what? I draft these. And so actually, I'm going to meet with my clients and update the plan and provide in a way that when one spouse dies, there is a way to protect the state of Washington from putting a lien on the assets of whoever dies first, whether it's husband or wife. And you could say, look, we provide notice to the state. We have a safe harbor trust that has to be drafted before someone dies, but it's a way to make sure the state's not going to put a lien on the home or make you burn up all the assets. So really, especially for married folks, when I ask them what they want to have happen if one of them dies, well, they say, well, I love my spouse. I want to give everything to my spouse. Well, that it's a nice wish, but when I kind of test it out and I say, well, okay, would you be at all worried if when they died there was an estate tax due? Oh, well, I wouldn't want that. Well, what if the survivor got hit by a bus full of lawyers and they were sued? Well, I wouldn't want that. And when I give seminars, like you can hear me this week, sometimes when that's a good start. If all of a sudden, that I didn't fill out that whole thought there. What if the survivor remarries? Now, even my own parents, wonderful marriage, but they have seen when a spouse dies, and often it's us men, right? We need help in life, right? So sometimes we remarry. Well, have you ever seen an estate plan go sideways because of a remarriage? Right? Sometimes people marry someone the age of their kids. Sometimes it's the similar age, but sometimes people marry, and then the whole estate plan goes sideways, and that new spouse gets it all, and then the children, the grandchildren, the charities are cut out. Yeah, so tell me, that's my life. When I meet with someone, I absolutely want to talk about, well, how do you want to provide for your spouse? You could love them dearly, but maybe you want to give with a little bit of protection. So I know I want to explore some of the tax implications of that because we've got Mark Middlesworth here with us today, who's an accountant. So let me paint the picture. I'll introduce him, and then I want to talk about another little odd thing that I got this week, which was a request from a radio listener who wanted me to just send out a free trust. Hey, I don't know if I need a trust. Can you just send me the form? And I want to help people. I absolutely want to help people. But my answer to her and my answer to anyone that wants like a free form is, look, the forms are free. You can go online and get a lot of forms. What you're paying for is my advice, my counsel. I sometimes use the analogy, I'm a heart surgeon, all right? I don't know if you need heart surgery or if there's other things you can do. I don't know if someone needs a will or a trust or a power of attorney until I meet with them. So by all means, today give us a call at 1-800-955-8200. Go to my website, waltar.com. WALTAR.com, and set up a free initial consult or something like that. I'm in the business of helping people. And so what I want to do is I want to meet with you. And if any of you out there want a free initial consultation, call my office, go to my website, request a meeting. So the same thing I told this radio listener is, look, I am happy to have a free phone call, or better yet, an in-person meeting. And usually I would give, 30 minutes to an hour. If you've been to a seminar, I'll probably give you an hour or more of a free consult. Because I don't want to just give you a form. I've actually seen it where I have seen a trust that had the exact same language, word for word. I mean, it was obviously someone copied a form, typed up every single word other than the trustees and the beneficiaries, and it was completely wrong for the family that did the form. So handing out a free form is just it's just not a good way to go. I'm a planner. I'm a professional. I'm licensed. I mean, I need to spend some time with people. And that may be a good segue to some of this tax stuff. So I want to introduce Mark, talk with Mark a little about, all the IRS forms are online. They're actually free, aren't they, Mark?
Yes, they are.
Well, welcome to the show, Mark. Thank you for coming in. Mark Middlesworth and I don't even know how many years we've known each other, but he's done my individual returns. He's done my corporate returns. I have 2 corporations, and I've added some LLCs now. That's a limited liability company. And, I also have to do some trust forms. So he's a guy I trust and enjoy. I want to thank you for coming down here Saturday morning and joining us on the radio.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here and help you discuss these things. Will help people make their lives more organized and happy as they grow older in age.
Yeah, so taxes and making people happier. Tell me a little bit about your practice.
Well, it's a small local practice in Bellevue, and I have a wide variety of clients that range from gardeners to executives, and I do corporations, estates, and trusts, help people with all aspects of their lives. And it's a really great job because I get the opportunity to share intimate relationships with these people, and I really care for them and want their lives to go as well as possible. But as you've noted in some of your comments just today, is that some people don't take the proper precautions to make sure that their lives are in order as they get older. One of the things that you brought up just recently was having to do with somebody taking care of somebody as they got older. I had a situation where a older lady, she was in her 90s, she was waning in her health, but she had longed for the renewed relationship of her granddaughter. Her granddaughter came back into her life, and unbeknownst to anybody else, the woman's daughter, she had a power of attorney that she signed, or the my client signed, that nobody knew about. Well, then the granddaughter started buying things for herself.
Oh, no.
And it was pretty scary because now all of a sudden you have this elder lady that was in need of nursing care, and all of her assets were disappearing without her knowledge. And the granddaughter, who was the power of attorney, was in charge of it and really not capable of understanding this elder care situation and the needs for her protection.
Wow. Yeah, that's important stuff. And maybe I should kind of just remind our listeners, what is a power of attorney? So a power of attorney, I mean, technically it's an agency deal. Someone gives a power of attorney. Like, I'm married, so I have given my wife a power of attorney. And so she doesn't need a power of attorney to sign for herself, but to sign for me, she does. So it's not a big deal to manage a joint bank account, but without a power of attorney, there's all sorts of problems people get into, even married folks. You were talking about, when someone's a widow or single, then, who the heck can manage their affairs? Who can pay their bills? Who could make the health choices? I like to have different financial powers of attorney, buy, sell, lease, transfer, that sort of thing, file tax returns, handle the money, kind of the fiduciary stuff. I like to have a separate one with health because, when I'm talking with people and I'm testing them out, tell me about this person you want to list as the power of attorney. I want to make sure that they're not desperate for money. They haven't filed for bankruptcy. They're not, bad with money. So often we need someone that's good in that capacity, trustworthy, and then it may be a totally different person who you'd trust to admit you to the hospital or make those sorts of choices. So that's power of attorney stuff. So, yeah, if someone has a power of attorney and they're using it for their own benefit, that is a big no-no. I mean, it's just morally wrong, for one. And kind of human nature. Sometimes people are greedy. Sometimes good-intending kids will all of a sudden, well, Mom would have wanted to help me reshingle the house or pay for the grandkids' orthodontia. Really? I mean, let's be clear about that. Especially, I think in your circumstance, you said, look, the grandma or the person really needed the funds.
Right. It was the grandma. And the granddaughter was at a whole different stage in her life. She was just married and wanting a house for her and her husband. And all of a sudden, grandma's funds provided a means for being able to do that. And I think, as you noted, the opportunity that you have as you meet with somebody, you're going to be able to discern who's going to be the better person to be in charge of finance, healthcare, whatever. And it's not always possible for one person, especially this young gal with no experience, to be able to be empathetic towards her grandmother and her grandmother's needs.
We're going to have fun today, talking about taxes, talking about things you can do to make it easier on your loved ones. And this week, we're also going to have a seminar sweep. That means we're giving multiple seminars in different locations, so it's easy for people to come. They are free. We provide some food and drink, and we would be happy for you to just go to our website, Waltar, www.waltar.com, and sign up for one of these seminars that are coming up. So we're going to go to a break here in a little bit. Call us in today if you want to talk about taxes, if you're worried about, gosh, do I need a will or a trust? what kind of a power of attorney fits my circumstance. If you're wondering about that, by all means, give us a call. We'd be happy to help you out.
Legacy Planning. Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Has it been over 5 years since you've reviewed your estate plan? Well, the laws keep changing. You'll definitely want to keep listening. The lines are open at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. Live and local. This is Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Wondering if you really have complete, up-to-date estate plans? Call Steve right now at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
All right, we are back. We're back, and for Christmas I got a gift from my wife, a little devotional book called Jesus Calling by Sarah Young, and I liked this one. It was a reading from this week, and I just wanted to read it to our listeners, and then we'll get back into good old estate planning and all of that good stuff. So it's kind of written as if Jesus is talking directly to you. So here it says, I am leading you step by step through life. Hold my hand in trusting dependence. Let me guide you through the day. Your future looks uncertain and flimsy, even precarious. That is how it should be. You see, secret things belong to the Lord, and future things are secret. When you try to figure out the future, you're grasping at things that are mine. This, like all forms of worry, is actually an act of rebellion, doubting my promises to care for you. Whenever you find yourself worrying about the future, repent and return to me. I didn't think I'd be saying repent over a radio show, but anyway, there it is. I will show you the next step forward, and the one after that, and the one after that. Relax and enjoy the journey of my presence, trusting me to open up the way before you as you go. I think we all want the 20-year life plan. God doesn't give that to us. He says, rely on us each day. And yet, here's my little, I'm not reading, I'm just talking, listeners. I think we all want to be good stewards of what we have. And I'm going to ask you some questions, Mark, about this, about writing checks to the IRS and the state of Washington. But what I find is, daily we ought to trust in God and this, that, and the other. But we got to organize our estate or else we get into all sorts of problems. And, there's other scriptures that say, a good person leaves, an inheritance to his children's children. And there's a lot of this planning. So I get problems all the time where people did an estate plan. Maybe they lived in California where probate is really expensive. And they moved here and they didn't review the plan with an attorney. They didn't come in and see someone like me. And lo and behold, someone dies. And yes, I can do the probate. Actually, maybe they had a living trust. Maybe they avoided court. But in Washington, when someone dies, we have a different rule here. So you can only pass, $2 million and change to someone other than the spouse. And so with the wrong tax language, I sometimes have to be the bearer of bad news and say, guess what? Your estate plan didn't have the right tax boxes. It didn't fit the state of Washington. So you may have to write a check for $240,000 or more if it didn't have the right tax plan. Let me say that again. If the wrong planning, the wrong documents are done, and someone dies, there can be a tax in the state of Washington even when one spouse dies. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah, that's true. In fact, I just had a recent situation where it was actually the last to die. The woman had an estate worth over $3 or $4 million here in the state of Washington.
Yeah.
She passed away, and her kids, which are, her kids now are in their 70s, so they aren't kids anymore. But had they done the proper estate planning, they could have gifted away enough of her estate so that she wouldn't have had any estate tax for the state of Washington. But instead, they ended up having to write that check for $300,000 to the state of Washington.
$300,000 to Uncle George here.
Yep.
I mean, the state of Washington.
And they didn't have to do that, but it was just because of not taking a dedicated plan to reducing the estate taxes, because she wouldn't have been bad off by having gifted $2 million to her kids, reducing her federal estate. Obviously, she didn't have any federal estate tax, but she could have gifted her estate down below the amount that she had owed to the state of Washington.
Yeah, this is huge. If you're driving down the road, you should pull over and write this number down, okay? Just pull over and write down the number to my law firm, which is 425-455-6788. That is 425-455-6788. So I want to unpack that a little bit. So what you're saying, and I know this to be true, but is that with proper planning, there would have been a way to avoid most or even all of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. They could have, the kids would have had an additional, $150,000 each with just simple planning, the mom making a gift before she died. She had a fast acting cancer, so she didn't live very long. It was like 3 months from notification to her death. But still, in that length of time, it was plenty of time to go, hey, you need to do something about your estate. And in fact, she did have an attorney, but the attorney didn't mention anything about it.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. So, I had someone in this week that was a single person, and her estate is north of $2 million. And so we wanted to make sure to explain the gifting rules because, you can give $14,000 a year to as many people as you want. And I often tell people, look, I could write a check to everyone for $14,000. They'd bounce after about one. But, Bill Gates could write a check to everyone, right? He could just do that. But if you give more than that, you've got to file a 709 gift return. And that's great. You do those.
Yeah, correct. I think
I don't draft those.
One thing to take into consideration is the $14,000 is supposed to include all gifts made during the year. So the $14,000 is the maximum for the year, so it needs to be reduced by Christmas presents, Hanukkah presents,
exactly,
your birthday presents, anything like that. So
I tell people not to write a check for 14. Do it for 13.2 or give a little breather room there. The IRS is always looking for ways to hit people up on money.
That's right. I mean, the IRS has an incredible arsenal of penalties given to them by Congress, and all they need is a little opportunity, and that's given to them by way of an audit where they get into your life and all of a sudden make it miserable.
And here's the other cool thing that I was telling a client this week is like, look, Washington State does not have a gift tax issue.
Correct.
So that's wonderful for married folks because we can do fancy planning and we can avoid the Washington State estate tax between spouses. But even from a federal standpoint, we know of the $14,000 deal, but also tuition paid directly to an institution, whether it's UW or Wazoo or Princeton or Yale, that is okay. You could write a check to your grandchild and then do a check directly to Princeton, and that would be excluded.
That's correct. And that also applies to medical expenses. So if, let's say that you had a child, granddaughter, whatever, who had some severe medical issues, as long as you write the check directly to the hospital or the doctor, it's not considered a direct gift to them. And so it's a way of reducing your estate, but also avoiding the gift tax compliance requirements of filing the Form 709.
Exactly. And what I tell people, and again, it came up in planning this week, is you don't write a check to the grandchild and say, now pay your doctor. What you do is you pay the dental bill. You pay directly the care provider.
Yeah, the orthodontist or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So
so it is important, like you mentioned earlier in the reading that you gave, is that I think God requires us like He does. He's a house of order, and I think He wants us to get our houses in order, and that's why the planning is so vital to making sure that you can click one thing off your bucket list and move on and enjoy life.
Yeah, I think so. And my kind of call to do estate planning was because my mother-in-law died, and I did the probate, I did the 706 return. In those days, I did them. Now I give them to good accountants that can handle those estate returns. But I realized I've got the mind of an attorney and the heart of a pastor. I want to help families. I've done this for more than 20 years now, and that's. I thought I did great wills and trusts early on, and I've been around long enough that I've seen a lot of estate plans don't work. And so the second book that I've written is called Legacy Wealth Planning, and when you could order them from me or you can go, there's a few spots you can get them online or university bookstore. But instead of paying $20 plus a whole lot of tax, I'll kind of eat the tax portion there myself and usually allow people to buy them for $10 if you come to a seminar. But the seminars is called Legacy Wealth Estate Planning, why most estate plans don't work. If you either don't have a plan or it's been a number of years, you don't know if you need a will or a trust, I can't make everyone experts in a 2-hour session, but I am giving seminars. And they're in Kirkland, they're in Issaquah, they're in Bothell. We do some that are kind of a brunch time, some are lunchtime, some are evening. We try to make it work out for you. I would encourage any and all the listeners to come to one of these seminars or try to get a free consult for yourself, because I can give you some advice when you call in, but I can give you better advice if you're a bit educated. You'll learn a little bit about these sorts of things. And then we offer free initial consultations. So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and take another break now and say, look, by all means, give us a call at 1-800-955-8200, because you can talk estate planning, you can talk tax planning. We're here to help you. We'll be talking to you right after this break.
Do you need a will or trust or no planning at all? You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Join in the conversation at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Join in the conversation now at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
We're back, and I was talking with Mark Middlesworth, my own accountant, a CPA. He's got a practice in Bellevue. And during the break, you told me what we just have to share with listeners, a story about a client of yours who bought a pickup. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, it was really funny. This person had bought a pickup that he wanted to restore. He found it out in Maple Valley, and he was buying it from the estate of this gentleman who had passed away, and his grandson was selling the pickup for him, so he bought the pickup for like $1,500, and he was excited to get it and brought it home and started tearing it apart because he was going to restore it. And he opened up the floorboard, and there were like 200 bricks of silver bars. And he just
oh my God, that was like, thank you.
And so, but he called the office and asked what to do, and that there's certain tax laws about a treasure trove that you find that would be taxable.
Exactly.
But then we had a brief conversation about it, and then he called up the grandson and said, "Hey, I bought the pickup. I didn't buy the silver from you, and I found this." And the people came, and they were happy to get the silver, but they gave him half of it as a reward.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah,
I think it goes to show that honesty is the best policy, and it's amazing to me the integrity that the guy had to go and give the phone call to the sellers and say, "Hey, I didn't buy this."
Yeah, wow, pretty impressive. That's just a win-win, So sometimes like, oh, what do I do? But by being honest, by being open, it turned out to be kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, it's great, and it's a great story, and it's. I think, like you, Steve, it's fun to share these intimate relationships that we have with our clients as we care for them, and it's fun to know somebody that has that type of integrity, and makes me want to be more like them if the situation ever comes up for me.
I thought of this just because of the windfall. I heard a story of a grandfather that he kind of wanted his grandson to start reading the Bible, so he gave him a Bible, and grandson, years and years and years went by, and for some reason, at one point, grandson was desperate. He was bored. He picked up the Bible, and he saw a $20 bill right there, at the book of Genesis, and he started reading and made it through, and then in Exodus, he saw another 20. So he quickly flipped open, and there were $20 bills strewn throughout that whole book. Another rewarding experience.
Yeah, that's funny. I know I have a couple of books that I've tried to get my kids to read over over time, and I've warned them kind of a similar thing. Don't throw anything that I have in the house away, because you may be surprised of what's between the pages.
There could be a treasure trove there for you.
Exactly.
Speaking of treasures, what if someone has property outside of the U.S.?
Well, I think for us living here as close as we are to Canada, we either know people who live in Canada or have relatives or have immigrated from Canada to the United States. So Canada in particular, if you own property, you have to, and you're renting it, for example, you have to have an agent up in Canada that'll handle the collection of rents, and also to pay over a non-resident tax to the Canada Revenue Agency for you, and then you'll have to file. Well, you don't have to file, but it's a voluntary tax form, filing a T1 general under Section 216, which you report the revenues and expenses of that Canadian rental.
Now, I'm not going to remember that number, and you know that, but any of you listeners there, if you've got accounting questions, just call our office at 425-455-6788, and I'll put you in touch with an accountant or someone that can help you with these sorts of things.
So another thing that happens, Steve, other than just the owning of property, is let's say that you inherit something from somebody who is a resident of Canada. Say your great aunt or your grandparents from Canada bequeath you $50,000. Well, although that money is not taxable, because inheritance are typically not taxable, as we talked earlier about gifting, a gift is not taxable to the recipient, it's taxable to the giftor. In this case, you have somebody that is trying to give somebody to their grandchild, and they receive $50,000. And, of course, the question is, well, how do I report that? Is it taxable? As I mentioned before, no, it's not taxable, but the U.S. Treasury still wants you to report that information. And so there's a special form, if you had received an inheritance, that you should report that on the form and include that with your personal tax return for the year in which you received that gift.
Yeah, Canada is so close. It's I don't know who's the younger sister. Kind of, we're you can go across the border, and now it's a little longer and harder. But we tend to think everything is nice, everything's friendly. But there are real differences in tax law. Revenue Canada likes to get involved pretty quickly, and I find that in the U.S., trusts are really good and nice and flexible, and I can have a client that has real property in all 50 states, and you can avoid probate in every state. Most revocable living trusts, you can move things in and out, you can own real property, no problem, but not so in Canada. I have clients that have a condo in Whistler or something like that, and if you were to take something you own and you were to stick it into a U.S. Revocable trust, Revenue Canada would consider that a taxable event.
Right. They consider that a deemed sale.
Right.
And so that means you have to pay tax on that as though you sold it, even though you didn't.
So while I'm talking about trusts, the one asset that you don't want to put in a trust, even in the U.S., is something where you're deferring taxes on, like an IRA. So my wife and I, we have a revocable living trust. We've got real property in more than one state in it, so we're avoiding 4 probates with one trust. Pretty powerful. But I didn't take my name off of the IRA. My IRA, I get to list my wife as the beneficiary. Then I get to list the trust as a beneficiary for my children. And it takes some fancy planning. You can, when properly done, and you got to see a really qualified attorney, you can direct IRA funds to be handled in a trust for the benefit of individuals and still stretch out that over their lifetime. But you don't want to just take your name off and stick it in the trust. That would cause current income taxes. Right.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that you bring up about the IRA and planning in that relationship, because another way that IRAs, retirement plans, are effectively onerous to people is they don't, in the case of a divorce, they don't change the beneficiary's name. So I've seen in the case of the divorce where they get a divorce, in the divorce decree says that the husband gets his 401k plan, the wife gets everything else, and he never changes the beneficiary's name on the 401k plan. He remarries, and then he dies. Well, even though the divorce decree said that the wife got all of this other property because he didn't change the name on his 401k plan, she gets that regardless of what the divorce decree said. And
that's true, and that's alarming. So, I mean, if you have been divorced, and it's happening, 52% of the time in and outside of Christian realms, I mean, divorce is prevalent, you got to review your estate plan.
Correct.
Absolutely. And some of these cases go all the way up to the Supreme Court or tax court and things like that, and you're right. You got to change the beneficiaries.
Yeah, it's amazing how a little thing you think you've taken care of in one legal setting is not passed through to everything else.
Well, I have to admit, I did divorce law for a couple of years early in my practice, and I know that no matter, a lot of attorneys, they have it in the decree, but they don't redeed the property. They don't do the quadros. They don't. Sometimes they consider once you walk out of court and someone's divorced, they consider their job to be done. No, there's a little follow-up work to do.
Right, you're exactly right, and a lot of times I think the confusion is you don't know who's going to take that baton and do the work that needs to be done, because as an attorney you may think, well, hey, we've gone to court, it's all in these documents, you know what you need to do. You need to contact your investment advisor or whomever and make these changes. And
right, or you represented, say, the wife, and
yeah.
So, now is the former husband really going to sign the deed that you prepare? Well, guess what? Someone needs to do that work.
Right.
So it may or may not be the IRA beneficiary, 401k, life insurance, that sort of thing. But what I often see is someone's been divorced for years. They come into me and their ex-spouse is still on the deed to the house.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, I think it just takes the constant review and upkeep. And so if anybody calls in and request a free interview, I mean, they need to bring their documentation so you can actually review their personal situation to know what they need, because the things that we're even talking about today are really general, and it's hard to know what specifically applies to each individual.
Oh, speaking of which, I mean, when people are doing tax returns and stuff, what kind of stuff do they need to bring in?
Well, thanks for asking that question. And usually it's just the current year information, but a lot of times it's nice to have at least a prior year tax return so you can see if there's any carry forward issues that need to be dealt with and included with the current year. And, for all the tax returns that I've done, there's never been one tax return that is exactly the same as another. And I think that's what you're alluding to earlier, is you can't just rip out pages of a trust and give it to somebody and say, okay, there you go, this works for you, because it's never worked for me when preparing tax returns. I use the same forms year after year, but nobody's tax return is completed exactly the same. One thing I wanted to bring up before we move on too is because we're right now in the tax season, a lot of people are aware of the phishing scams and the different phone call scams that are going on, and I just wanted to reiterate what happens. The phishing scams that we'll see on the internet is you'll get an email that looks like it's from the IRS that says you need to fill out this personal information. Just click here. And you'll check the links that they show on their email, and they're valid links. You click on the irs.gov link, it'll go to the IRS's website. And so it may lead somebody to think that, hey, this is a legitimate thing. Do not push the button to fill in your personal information. That is a scam. Another one that a lot more people are being familiar with is they get a phone call from somebody pretending to be from the IRS. And these people are getting more and more sophisticated as they're going on. But they say they're from the IRS, that you owe an extraordinary amount of taxes, and that they're down at the Bellevue police department, and they're going to come over and arrest you right away unless you give them, your bank account number and stuff. And I actually had a friend that's a physician. He got a phone call and he says, "Oh, look, I just want to get this over with. Do you take a debit card?" And it threw the people off so much they didn't know what to do, because I think they were expecting a fight. And so they hung up and they were going to call him back. And then in the meantime, he called me and said, "Hey, what is this?" And I said, "It's a scam. Don't give him any information." But I know that we get at least 2 or 3 phone calls a week in our office about this happening. So people, just please keep your personal information private. The IRS is not going to contact you in either email or a phone call like that.
That's a good reminder. So yeah, you can hang up on someone that you're getting that threatening call. People pry upon fear.
Yep.
And it's just so easy to click. And yeah, even if it looks legit, don't give your information. The IRS is not going to contact you via email.
Correct.
Yeah, that is an excellent point there. Boy, IRS scams and monies, and then, it's not just the writing the check, right? But then sometimes they get all your personal information. Then that leads to identity theft and a whole myriad of problems.
Yeah, but you're right. Then your problems have just begun. One other thing, then we were both familiar with it this last week. There was a person who was receiving long-term care benefits that she had dementia, been in a nursing home since 2009, and she was receiving long-term care benefits, and she got a 1099 LTC, and that was because she had a long-term care insurance benefit program that was paying for her nursing home care. Well, that actually has to be reported on your income tax return.
Oh, right.
Otherwise, the IRS is going to say, oh, you got $75,000 of income. And this is exactly what happened to this person, is all of a sudden the IRS prepared a tax return for them and showed that they owed $20,000. And they were going to be taken to tax court, and this was going to be enforced to be collected. And
so the IRS is not going to call you on the phone. They're not going to email you. But if you haven't done reporting, or if there's something they think, they can actually do a deemed return for you, and they'll send a letter, and eventually this can lead to some threatening collection.
Correct. And we were able to head this off, but it was just before it was going to go either to tax court or because it was in collections.
Oh, and you helped me. This was a client of mine, desperate. She called me, and I got her in touch with you, and you were able to kind of give her some guidance there.
Right, yeah.
I appreciate that. So after our last break, we'll come back with Mark Middlesworth. If you are worried about nursing home costs, if you're worried about whether your will or trust is valid or all the lawsuits out there, you ought to come to one of our seminars or give us a call. We'll be right back after this break.
Legacy Planning. You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Is there ever a good time to do estate planning? Ask your kids. They'll know that right now would be the perfect time. Call in for the right answers at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. This is Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar, committed to helping you with personalized and compassionate estate planning. The lines reopen for your call at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
All right, we're back. This is Steve Waltar with Legacy Planning, and we would love to have you come to one of our seminars. This week, we're going to be in Issaquah, Bothell, and Kirkland, and you can find that on our website, which is waltar.com. Sign up for that. We offer free initial consultations and reviews. We help with that. And today, I've got Mark Middlesworth in here with me today, who's an accountant, and there's lots of reporting requirements. I think the IRS is looking for money, and it seems to me, Mark, you had a story about certain postcards or certain things that may have related some foreign accounts. What's that all about?
Yeah, Steve, it's a really interesting story. That what happened is people may be aware of is that for a long time the wealthy people and the really people who were the movers and shakers had Swiss bank accounts. Well, the U.S. Treasury was after these foreign banks to divulge who these owners of these accounts were. And more political pressure was being put on these Swiss bank accounts to divulge this information because they wanted to catch these tax cheats. And the Swiss banks didn't really know what to do, and so they sent postcards out to these owners of the account holders. And
they're trying to be good stewards and touch their clients, right?
Well, I think that it was an end run in trying to comply with what the U.S. Treasury wanted. But so what happened is the U.S. Treasury was able to trace those postcards to the recipients of those account holders, and lo and behold,
busted.
Yeah, and it's a pretty severe penalty that happens, because what the U.S. Treasury can do is, for these unreported bank accounts that people have signature authority over, is the penalty is 50% of the account's balance.
Whoa, 50% of the account's balance. That could be big.
It is, and it's huge. The story that I was reading a couple of years ago, there was a court case about a gentleman from Florida that had put, I think, either $2 million or $1.5 million in a foreign bank account, and he never reported that on his tax return, and he got caught. And he didn't report the income earned on his tax return, which was a no-no, because sometimes they'll give some leniency if you report the income, just because you didn't file the FBAR report, which is the foreign bank account reporting.
Okay. Yeah.
And but they caught him, and so they were going to take half of the account, and so it was like, I think it may have been $3 million. So half of that for 1 year was $1.5 million. Half of that for another year was $1.5 million, and then another 50%. And so he ended up giving up his whole $3 million and had to cough up another $1.5 million in penalties just so he wouldn't go to jail.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
that is brutal, brutal, brutal. Hey, there are people that do corporations and LLCs, and they do it for asset protection reasons, and sometimes there's some things you can do to actually kind of trim and save some taxes. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, just briefly, one thing it mainly has to do with S corporations. S corporations, there's always been a game per se of what you could do is pay yourself a salary that may be less than what the net income would be.
Okay.
So let's just say that the business made $100,000 a year.
Right.
You could pay yourself a salary of $50,000 a year and only pay the payroll taxes on that, the Social Security and Medicare, which is 15.3%, because you're both the employee and the employer. But on that other $50,000, you aren't going to pay payroll taxes on. And so that was just a way of saving another 15.3% on that other $50,000 that wouldn't necessarily give you any benefit as far as incrementally increasing your Social Security benefits down the road and save you some money.
Yeah, and I have a couple of corporations, and they are both S corporations, and I thank you. Every year you do those complicated returns for me and keep me legal.
I think the main thing that we want to press on that is that in your situation you have adequate compensation. That's where most people get into trouble, is they make the $100,000 a year in their business and they only pay themselves $1,000 or $2,000 salary.
I remember this quote in tax law: pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So yeah, you can be you want to have the right professionals around you and do it right. You don't want penalties. You don't want the IRS to come back after you. And that is good. Well, it's a wrap for today with a nice show. And what we want to do is encourage you to call us during the week at 425-455-6788. That's 425-455-6788. And this week, we're giving seminars. So go to waltar.com and sign up for those. Most of my clients want to avoid governmental involvement. You know, we love our country, but we don't want to pay more than our fair share of taxes or fees. Most people want to avoid nursing home costs, taking everything, or the family fighting over things. Those are things we cover. That's what legacy planning is all about. Have a great week. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Legacy Planning with local attorney Steve Waltar. If you have questions about what you heard on today's show or estate planning in general, be sure to call Steve's office in Bellevue to schedule your free no-obligation consultation. Call Steve at 425-455-6788. That's 425-455-6788. And remember, you can always listen to today's or previous programs by going to waltar.com. That's WALTAR.com. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and be sure to join us again next Saturday morning from 8 till 9, right here on 820 AM KGNW.